So I'm still fixating on Iron Lung, nothing's really changed in that department, but today I'm going to be yapping about the recollection theory. A theory which explores what actually is the blood, and more interestingly, what the hell is Simon's monster? This is something that I've been trying to understand for a while, so much so that I've actually finished making the art for this video and then scrapped it, realising a completely new angle that I preferred to others. Especially since I used to have 4 potentials for what Simon's monster could be, whereas now I have 1 I can focus on and be happy with. If you're on YouTube, there are chapters so you can choose what question interests you most and just skip right to that one. And with that said, let's begin. Throughout the film, we see the blood exhibit behaviours like that of a fungus, the way it grows inside the SM-13 and the way it causes reactions when it interacts with Simon, such as altering his perception or physically altering his appearance, which makes me think that the blood is actually a massive swarm of semi-sentient cells. Another thing that points towards fungus in my mind is that there is a type of mold in Chernobyl that consumes radiation. It's almost like a fungus in the way of how mycelium acts in like a sort of hive mind way. But more notably, I believe that the blood is attracted to humans because it has forgotten the knowledge of what it means to be human and is actively seeking out its original form. Because remember, this is human blood and it is incredibly talented at mimicry. I believe that the blood is trying to reassemble itself. This is what the frog is and what the blood eels are. Yes, blood eels plural, as the skeleton that Simon first comes across is a dead version of the blood eel. This is the blood attempting to become human again. But the memory as encoded is wrong. With the blood eel, we can see in its model it's not just built above the 2 skulls, but numerous limbs such as legs cascading down its entire length. In addition, let's think about the design of the blood eel and the frog from the game, and then think of the SM model of submarines that was sent down there. The SM submarines are all ocean crawlers. They lack ballast tanks that can be manipulated from the pilot seat, and so we can assume that the system automatically keeps them floating ever so slightly above the ocean floor a few meters. The SM submarines also have long slender bodies and a flat front. Flat kind of in the SM-8's case, which is more of a dome compared to the SM-13. The SM-13 also has a pathetic cage around its upper and lower front section, which kind of resembles the teeth of the blood eel. Now let's look at the blood eel and the frog. Flat faces, long slender bodies, and they stay relatively close to the ocean floor, like ocean crawlers. I believe that the creatures are the blood's first understandings of what it means to be human. They are a reflection of us. But what about the SMA crew? Couldn't their blood use the physical bodies, I hear you ask? Well, if the SM submarines are the blood's first encounter of humanity, then maybe when the SMA crew was assimilated, it didn't take their bodies. They weren't ripe yet. So what did it do instead? To evolve, it took their souls and placed them into the blood eel that we now know as Ellie. Alternatively, if it was analysed in the SM-8's exterior, we could say that the SMA crew was simply identified as like the brains of this mental creature, which was their first understanding and encounter with humanity. I think the SMA crew weren't studied by the blood for their bodies, but for their souls. The SMA crew do become the blood eel we know as Ellie. It has a voice, intelligence, all the things I talked about in my previous video. To further support that the blood remembers being human, the cave system that Simon finds himself stuck in does resemble parts of the inside of a human. Like ribbed archways, and even finding something resembling an eye when I first watched it. I also thought that Simon had been eaten by the eel and this was the inside of its gut. And the game that the movie is inspired by has man-made structures like buildings. But what if all of those are just memories of humanity that the blood became? The blood is perfectly capable of destroying the SM-13, but it doesn't. It changes it, it grows inside it, and it's done so well in the film, and so subtly, that you only notice when it's too late. It is trying to understand us and make us a part of it, to reclaim us, if you will. I do still think the Eldritch Eye in the blood fields is a catalyst for this transformation, but I think that the blood eel, frog, and the eye all act independently from one another. So what about Simon's monster? Simon's monster confused the hell out of me for the longest time. I've heard some people suggest purgatory or a time loop, which was my first thoughts as well. But the more I thought about it, the more I just really didn't like it. Time is linear for the SMA crew and for the blood eel. It doesn't make much sense to me that Simon's is cyclical in nature. And I know Ellie's on a linear timeline because if it was aware of the time loop, it wouldn't act how it does in the film. So maybe they aren't aware of the time loop. Which also doesn't make sense because the movie ends. It has an ending. The COI or Eden get the black box, Ellie gets killed, and Simon merges the seed and becomes the tree. I think that Simon's monster is a mixture of how the blood sees him and what the blood needs him to be to learn more about taking non-human form. Let me explain. The blood infects Simon within 120 seconds of the expedition starting, so we can assume at that point it is already in his system and beginning to read him. But there is a certain imagery that was incredibly striking the first few times I saw it in cinema, and that's the camera button's growth. The blood could have grown over the camera in any way, shape or form, but nope, it does so in the exact same pattern as Simon had done with the tape. The monster we see in the SM-13 also perfectly captures Simon's past and future behaviours. Hiding behind the wall panel, turning around on the pilot seat. Both actions are taken by Simon and replicated by the monster. Yes, these are future events, but the blood is already in Simon's system. Who's to say it can't read his habits and understand how he'd react? And the thing is with Simon, the blood doesn't get his form fully right either. That's what Simon's monster is. It's equilibrium between the blood and human form. So what happens in the sub isn't a time loop or a ghost, it's an intent, it's Simon's final destination, it's how the blood sees Simon. But what about the missing arm? Surely that's a disadvantage for a humanoid creature. And yes, but the arm Simon loses is holding the seed. Maybe the seed is instantly rejected by the blood, because it was keeping Simon too grounded to be physically altered. Also, Simon's not just any convict. Simon is Simon the Butcher. So maybe the blood sees him as a creature already drenched in blood, which makes him the perfect vessel or template for them to assimilate, as he might be considered more blood than human. That's what the blood is. That's what Simon's monster is. The blood is a memory of human biology without form trying to reconstruct itself. Simon's monster is the perfect form between human and the living blood. And that is what I call the recollection theory. Thanks for watching, and thanks to my friend Lee for making this incredible artwork of the eel, and a special thanks to my patrons for supporting my channel. If you want to help me out, it's only $2 a month, and you get to see behind the scenes stuff and your name in the credits. No pressure, just something to consider. More theories are to come, so please subscribe and leave a comment on what you think the blood is and what you think Simon's monster is.